All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Tom's Hardware Show, where we're just getting started. Uh, See, we don't have a lot of viewers yet, so I'm gonna make sure that we alert folks, maybe on our Twitter and elsewhere. Um, how are how are you both? How are you both doing?
I'm doing well, Avram. The PS5 announcement happened recently, so that was exciting.
Yeah. It's crazy how big that is. It's just crazy how big it is, and are people going to be able to actually fit that in their homes? I I mean, oh hey everyone who's joined us. I'm Abram, your editor in chief. Uh, with us we have senior editor Sharon Harding and staff writer Michelle Earhart. Uh, Michelle and I are the ones wearing the awesome hats.
I know, I feel left out.
I gotta rep the brand,
I know. What
Yeah,
am I
it just
doing?
yeah, that, that that's awesome. Is your lipstick Tom's Hardware red?
If you want to give me Tom's Hardware branded lipstick, feel free.
Yeah, yeah.
This is what I could get in the pandemic.
Well, that's what we're going into next is the lipstick business. I just want
Of course.
want everybody to know that.
I just need that RGB lipstick,
Oh, girl.
Oh man, that would. I mean, I think that's the last frontier that hasn't been RGB'd enough yet is the human body. I mean, right? I mean, you can get tattoos, but they just stay the same color all the time. You can wear clothes and jewelry, but there's very limited options in the way of RGB like jewelry, and I for one would like to see more RGB clothing and jewelry in this world. So hopefully, hopefully we can get because I feel like we've never reached peak RGB yet. In fact, maybe there could be RGB hair implants or something. Maybe that's
after
what we're.
Cyberpunk comes out, that'll kick the industry into gear. Or maybe we'll see a tie-in brand, Sephora X Cyberpunk.
It'll be overpriced for sure.
There you go. There you go. I think there's just a lot going on, obviously, this week with gaming and with new consoles. And so I wanted to start by talking about just like what we've seen in the console space. I know for Tom's Hardware, we don't always necessarily deal as much with console as with PC, but it is big hardware news. So Sharon, what happened?
Yeah, so this week we've seen console reveals from two of the biggest names in gaming, Sony and KFC. And so for anyone watching who's thinking like, wow, this girl's too hungry to be on video right now. No, KFC actually really did put up a video recently teasing what they were calling the KF console. It's supposedly going to give you 4K at 120 frames per second, inter-platform compatibility, which I would love, and a chicken chamber for all that chicken you're going to be eating when you get your new console. So
is the chicken cooked by the processor or
I'll be trying to do that as soon as I get one. But, so we saw that this week, and in a slightly more real reveal, we finally also got to see what the PlayStation 5 is going to look like. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. It's a very striking design that's different than your typical like rectangular prism that just sits on the table. Some of the things that stand out are it's white. We've seen comparisons calling it like looking like a desktop PC, looking like a car, a lot of comparisons out there. And there'll also be 2 versions. One will not have an optical drive, so they're calling that the digital version. So you can only play with games you download, and obviously you won't be able to play any Blu-ray discs in there either. So that being said, obviously one reveal is kind of more real than the other. But that being said, KFC got the tech video teaser reveal down perfectly. If you watch the video, they got like the shadowy black background and the zooming in and slow panning on the different parts, the dramatic music that pauses, and then the dramatic music like picks up and you get to see all the different features. So KFC's got our industry down. They got it down good. Finger looking good, you might say. Abram, I think you're muted.
Oops. What, Michelle? What other fast food restaurants do you think need to get into this growing console food space? As we know, Taco Bell had its own branded PlayStation.
Well, Taco Bell would be interesting because it's got that gordita Crunchwrap thing. So maybe you could have like an Xbox inside of a PlayStation, with those white sides. And then you could play both. But personally, I think ever since the Switch came out, we haven't seen that many portable competitors. And McDonald's is really well known for its fries. So maybe you could get like little fry-sized portables, or maybe something with fiber optic cables. I don't know, just throwing it out there.
That was a more detailed response than I could have imagined.
Yeah, I feel bad, but like I'm actually a big McDonald's stan. I know it's the most generic answer, but I love their fries, and their burgers like aren't good. But there's like a specific taste you get with them that you don't get with anything else. And sometimes I want that.
Yeah. Yes. In our chat, Matt says what I was thinking, which is White Castle should release here. I can actually show comments on the screen. White Castle should release a retro console in the size of and shape of a slider.
Well, they sell them in packs of like 30.
Yeah, well, that is true. They do need to sell them in large quantities, but yeah, I mean, I suppose you could. I mean, if it has to be the size of a slider, it would probably have to be using like a Raspberry Pi Zero or something to power it, because it couldn't be. Slider's not that big, but. You can play small bite-sized games on it. That's for sure.
There it is.
That's for sure. The best thing is just, that's the kind of thing you plug in after you've been for a long night out drinking, and you just plug in your slider.
Well, if we think about it, if we go back to McDonald's, they are famous for their pies. So we could give a whole new meaning to Raspberry Pi.
Yes. So there's definitely a lot of room. I mean, that's the kind of Happy Meal I would like. You go for your Happy Meal, instead of getting some kind of lame toy, you get a circuit board, you get some type of gaming system. That's a pretty Happy Meal right there. So Michelle, speaking of gaming, not only did we see these new consoles coming out this week, but we actually saw a lot of attention about new games that people are looking forward to. What games are there that are really hot that people are looking forward to?
So obviously Cyberpunk is coming up, but we've known about that for a while. For things that were revealed at the show, I think I think it might have been the first PS5 game they showed that wasn't like Grand Theft Auto, which we've already seen. Spider-Man Miles Morales is coming out, and that's a successor to the PS4 exclusive Spider-Man game that was really popular, except it's starring Miles Morales, who started off in the Ultimate comic books, but recently was in Into the Spider-Verse. He's a little bit younger, a little more like the original Peter Parker comics. and we weren't sure when it was released whether it would be like a sequel or an expansion on some PS5 remaster of Spider-Man that wasn't announced. There was a lot of misinformation going around about that even a few days after the show. But Insomniac, which makes the Spider-Man games, recently said on Twitter that it's going to be a standalone game, but not like a full sequel, sort of like a standalone expansion. So if you've ever played Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry, it'll be similar to that. Aside from that, there's also Stray coming up, which is a game where you play as a cat exploring a very cramped city of robots. And it kind of reminds me of an indie game that I covered a long time ago, way in my past, called HK Project, which was also a game about playing as a cat, and I believe in a city of robots, but the city was Kowloon Walled City, which is a really cool, I think it's the densest city on Earth, really cool place in China that's just very compact. I don't remember the square footage off the top of my head, but it's got pretty much everything a city would need in like the size of maybe a neighborhood. So that would be really interesting if Stray also does a similar setting, which it seems like it might, based on how sort of dense the city in the trailer looked to be. I'm curious to see where this robot angle comes in, though.
Yeah, I mean, who would not want to play as a cat? I mean, that's the ultimate. How many games can you play as a cat? I can't name too many.
Elder Scrolls and Final Fantasy 14 are off the top of my head, but those are cat people.
I mean, is Tails a cat?
Tails is a fox.
Oh,
Blaze is a cat, but we're going deep into Sonic lore for that one. She is playable though.
Big the cat is a cat, right?
Big the cat is a cat. Like it. Now, if we got a VR fishing game by Sega, that would be really interesting. There's actually a VR Space Channel 5 game that they announced recently, which is like a rhythm game where you move your body to dance to beat aliens. So I actually wouldn't be surprised.
So on the PC game front, what are you looking forward to?
On the PC game front, so it's a little quiet right now, I think, compared to the console game front, just because we got the PS5 announcement exploding. But during the PS5 announcement, they announced Horizon Forbidden West, which is the sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn. And Horizon Zero Dawn was previously a PS4 exclusive, but it's going to be coming to PC soon. And it's Sony published, which is something that I've never seen before. Like Sony putting one of their games on PC. We've seen a lot of Xbox collaborating with Nintendo recently, and Xbox willing to share their releases among Xbox and PC, but this is like the first time we've seen Sony do that. So I'm really curious to see how Horizon Zero Dawn plays on PC. And then, of course, when Cyberpunk comes out, it's going to be a console game too, like most PC games are at this point. But it's got big, like, classic CRPG energy to it. So I think PC is going to be the way to play that game.
So did you hear about there's a Viking game? I saw a trailer for it. It looks awesome.
The Assassin's Creed Viking game or Hellblade?
No, I think it's a completely new Viking game. Completely new Viking IP.
For PC?
Yes, for PC. I should know this because I tweeted it, but the name escapes me. I don't think it's a completely new game, and the graphics look awesome. Absolutely absolutely awesome.
Is it called Expeditions
I'll come back.
Viking?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. The what can I tell you? The name doesn't roll off my tongue, but their
Valheim?
trailer. What?
Valheim?
That's
Do
sounding more like it.
debuted at the PC Gaming Show this weekend?
Yes, it debuted at the PC Gaming Show.
Yeah, I think it's called Valheim, unless I'm pronouncing it wrong, which is also possible.
Oh, the PC Gaming Show, put on by our lovely friends over at PC Gamer.
Lovely.
Yes, Valheim. Valheim. That's it. Valheim. Yeah, that I have to say that looks really cool. Looks like an awesome game.
I just feel like, I mean, I took a pause from games for a while, mostly like when I was poor and in college. And I just feel like I've played the Spider-Man game. I just feel like they've gotten kind of dramatic lately. Like that Spider-Man game is perhaps more tier like gut-wrenching than some of the movies. Like they're just so dramatic. I don't know if I'm ready for the emotional roller coaster of the next Last of Us is coming out.
Last of Us is the big discourse right now if you're talking about gut-wrenching games.
Good,
yes.
Stressful.
Yes.
I wonder how Ellen Page feels about them basically using her image, but not.
Yeah, no, it looks exactly like her.
Yeah.
It looks like I'm watching Juno meets The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
For sure.
Although I think it's better than either of those. But.
Yeah, it's definitely filling the hole of like logical, consistent storytelling that The Walking Dead kind of strayed away from.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of games and it's interesting to think about, like, as a parent, like what games you let your kid play and what things you want your kid doing with their screen time. As a lot of people know, I have two kids, one who's 8, a son who's 8, and a daughter who's 16 months now. So she's not really doing a lot yet with technology. I wouldn't say she's not doing anything, because she keeps grabbing whatever we have and trying to use it. So she grabs the remote control and starts playing with the TV. My son leaves his laptop out and she's going over trying to type on it. I've given her like a wireless keyboard that I've lost a dongle for, and I just hand it to her so she can have something to type on, because otherwise she grabs like the good stuff. Like
when you hand your little sibling like the Nintendo controller and pretend that they're a player too.
I don't need to hand it. Like, I don't see one on the floor right now, but usually on the floor here is some type of controller that she's grabbed from the living room and brought into my home office. Mm-hmm. And she'll just sit there going like this, So she's acutely aware of how people use computers, or that these things are things that people use. The other day, last night, she grabbed my one of my Raspberry Pis off of my desk and was walking the living room with it. And I was like, uh-oh. I should have pushed it further back on the table because I didn't realize she would get to it.
Well, she's up till it. She's gonna want the pie.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Learning already. By the time that she's 3, she's gonna be like out programming you.
Challenge!
I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Which kind of leads to the programming part, which is. Now I think most of us who have kids are in summer break. My son's last official day was yesterday. Although even before that, he wasn't getting that much work every day. They would give him, he's in second grade or was in second grade. They'd give him maybe an hour to 2 hours worth of self-directed work every day, which we had to, make sure he did. And then he spent a lot of time like either gaming or programming. And now his big game is he's trying to modify games. So he's getting, he has this game called Roblox, which allows you to program your own levels, and he's really into that. But he also lately has gotten into using Scratch, which is a very common kids programming language. to kind of try to create little platform games in it. And I have tried to get him into using Python, using a library there called PiGame, which allows you to create games in Python. So for those of us who have kids of varying ages, the question is always like, what's the good stuff for teaching them about computers? Because there's a lot of stuff, a lot of products in the market that claim to be STEM toys or coding toys, and most of them are really bad. I mean, a lot of them, they will give you minimal competency in doing something, but I think a lot of them are very limited in what they can do. Obviously, especially with younger kids, the key thing that you want is for them to see a physical result of what they're doing. So giving them something that's on the computer or on the tablet only is boring. Robots and robot kits are really key. So you've got to figure out, okay, how do I get my kid a robot that is at their level? For really, really young kids, like 2 to 4 year olds, there are things that don't involve any coding at all or really any construction. They just have a series of like flashcards that you can roll the robot over and it'll do things. And that's thought to teach the kids about the idea of giving instructions to a computer, because it's rolling over a card and there's a logic to it. And one of those that I've seen that looks pretty good, I haven't tried it, is Botley. It's called Botley, and that's about $33 on Amazon right now. When you get to a slightly older age, maybe 5, or depending on the maturity of your 4-year-old, maybe it's much, maybe somewhere between 4 and 6. Although it's labeled for, I think, 7 or 8, but I'm just telling you in my experience. Lego Boost is a fantastic set, but it seems that they are not, there's some short supply of the original Lego Boost kit. There's the Lego Boost Star Wars Droid kit, which does the same thing, but with Star Wars droids. So it's added level of coolness. Those are about $200. And what's cool about those is they're Legos. You put together the robot with Legos, but it has like real sensors and motors, and then the software you use to program them is like the best kids programming software I've ever seen, because it's all block based, which is a lot of kids programming languages are block based, meaning no typing code, but it is all pictorial. There's no reading whatsoever, so your child does not have to be literate. They do not have to know how to read and write yet to use the software and work with robots. And indeed, my son was using it when he was like in kindergarten, and couldn't read yet, but there's not even one word in the interface. It's all pictorial, and it's all sort of shows you how to drag and drop with a little finger on the screen. And it's great at sort of giving you assignments that build on each other. So it's like, oh, first you're going to do this part of the robot, and you're going to make it do this, and then you're going to do that part and make it do that. So you're growing, which is great. And then there's a series of other types of robots out there. I have one actually over here that I can show. This is Wonder Workshop Dash. This robot here, I think it's normally about 150. This has been around a long time, and it has its own little app several apps actually that you can use to program it. But it's all, they give you lessons that you have to kind of go through, and it's got some neat things, but it also is a very proprietary coding. It's just, you just code it with their language. Granted, there are some APIs out there for more advanced people that they could kind of hack into it. So what this does is it can roll around. It can turn its head. This lights up in RGB colors. No RGB hair, though.
Gotta get that RGB fascination started early.
Yes. So this is a decent, and they're expansion kits. There's like one that gives it like a little xylophone it can play, which is really cute. This is really cute, and it teaches you some programming concepts, but the app itself is very like, okay, do things using our very limited set of blocks. It doesn't. Now Now, I am a big fan, and not everybody might agree, of trying to get your kids to learn programming languages and programming and you work with components that adults use, or at least that are that they can take the same knowledge and use it with something else. So obviously, as people know, I'm a big fan of Raspberry Pi, and there are some wonderful books out there that you can use with your kids to really help them do projects with the Raspberry Pi. This obviously is something where an older kid could do it all by themselves. Younger kid, maybe some of my son's age, you do it with them. This book is really neat, Raspberry Pi Projects for Kids by Dan Aldred. It has a book like 10 or 12 different projects in it. It has ones where you kind of code things in Minecraft. It has ones where you make a radio broadcaster. It has ones where you make like a camera and things like that. It's got a lot of really neat things in it. Also, one thing, and someone got my son this, is BitBox. They send you a coding assignment monthly. Now this is one of those where I'm of a split mind about it. It's cool that they're sending your kid a coding assignment monthly, but it actually uses worded code, which is nice because when you want to take off the training wheels, you don't want the block-based languages where you drag around blocks. But on the other hand, it doesn't appear to be in any actual. It looks a little like JavaScript, but doesn't appear to be in an actual like grown-up programming language. It looks like it was made just for this. And again, I'm just more, while it certainly helps, there are certainly concepts that you transfer. I feel like when you get something that uses like adult things, like, adults use Raspberry Pi, adults write in Python, adults write in JavaScript, those sorts of things I think are much more helpful, because then you can, your kid can then really, there's a lot of resources out there for them to take whatever they're working on to the next level. Whereas when you have something like the Dash here, or maybe BitBox, where you have to use their code, I mean, they're giving you their own proprietary code. There's only so much you can do with it before you've got to learn a different language.
So I have a question for you, Abram. I mean, obviously, we like you said, well, we love hardware. We're Tom's Hardware, and you talked about like having the actual object where the kids can see what they're doing, and obviously, getting a toy robot is always really fun, even before you realize that you're going to be coding with it. Like, since there are kids who have apps now, we actually just got my niece and nephew like a kid's tablet, which I think is supposed to be a surprise, so I hope they're not watching. But are there any apps or things online that you can get kids just interested in STEM without investing the money in hardware that they might like you find out a week later they're not into it, or they break it, or it's just kind of expensive?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are several things that exist to make your own games. So Scratch, which is actually, you want to look for Scratch 3, is available for a lot of platforms, including in the web browser. That is a very popular open language from MIT that's made for kids. And it's called Scratch because there's, by default, the little sprite that you control as a cat. And there's a lot of code out there to make games with it, and a lot of people use it. And it's while as an adult I would not use it, it is actually quite extensible. It works with a lot of different things. There's a lot of games out there that work with it. So I think Scratch and there's a lot of just tutorials and resources. So I think Scratch is a really good one. I honestly don't know if this is going to be like beyond his level, but one of my pieces of advice to everybody watching is never underestimate what your child is capable of working with. Always start at what you think is a level above them, or many levels above them, or what interests you as an adult, and see if they can keep up. So Michelle, you used to be you've worked as a game developer.
Right. So like Sharon was saying, as far as like free or inexpensive tools to help kids get interested, I don't know about doing that with physical results, but you can definitely, I think games are a great way to see results really quickly from coding in a way that's engaging for a kid. So Unity and Unreal are like the two big professional game engines right now, and those are both free to download and use for pretty much anything a kid would want to do. I mean, if they're releasing something on PS5, then they'll have to pay some licensing fees. But then and those, I would say Unreal might be a little more tricky, but I could see an older kid getting into Unity, especially the way that it works with object-oriented programming. So you just create an object, you plop it in a space, almost like putting a Minecraft block in a space, and then there's a bunch of pre-built things in Unity that you can put on it, but you can also put a custom script on any object. And if the kid is comfortable scripting in C#, then you can go ahead and just script out using the Unity library and make the object do pretty much anything you want to do within that library's capabilities. Now, I think the documentation for Unity is a little shoddy, and Unity's UI is constantly changing because it keeps absorbing other tools into it. So it's got like a bunch of heads hanging off of it that might be a little intimidating for a kid. I actually made my thesis game for my grad school where I studied game design in something called Game Maker, which is also another professional game engine. If you're aware of the game Hyper Light Drifter, which had its sequel shown off, or its spiritual successor shown off in the PS5 showcase, that was made in Game Maker. Undertale, big hit, that was made in Game Maker. And Game Maker is sort of like a pared down Unity that works specifically for 2D games, whereas Unity and Unreal are built for 3D games and kind of have 2D thrown as an afterthought. Game Maker focuses on 2D, and it's a little bit more user-friendly in that it doesn't have all those heads hanging off of it like Unity does, where they see something they like in the asset store and decide to buy it and make it official. Instead, everything in Game Maker is held within the engine, so you never have to open an external program or download anything from an asset store. You don't even need to open MonoDevelop or Visual Studio. All of the coding is done in engine. And Avram won't like this. It is done in a proprietary coding language, but it's very similar to C#. It's just a little more forgiving. So, for instance, sometimes you can forget to put the semicolon at the end of your lines of code, and the code will still run.
Whoa.
But I want him to learn the hard way that he has to keep the semicolon.
There's an animator built into Game Maker. There's also an animator built into Unity, but it's terrible. So I think Game Maker, a license for Game Maker 2, last I checked, to just own it was like $60 to $70. But if that's a little too much for you, there's also a small game engine for making tiny, like sort of 8-bit arcade style games called Pico 8. That's $15 on a website called Itch.io that a lot of game developers use. I haven't worked with Pico 8 a lot, so I can't say that much about it. But if you played Celeste, which was a big game last year, maybe the year before that, it had an entire recurring mini game built in Pico 8 inside it that was basically the main game, but pared down to be 8-bit. It's basically, if you know of an Amiga or a Commodore 64, it's a fantasy version of those consoles that never actually existed. And what's cool about it is you make your games in the browser, and then when you're done, you can just share a URL with people, and that's a cartridge that you plug into the console, and then you can play the game. I believe it also has a proprietary scripting language, but it's also fairly in depth, closer to something like Game Maker than Scratch. And then if you just want something completely free and using a regular adult programming language like Avram likes, there's something called P5.play, which was made by a game developer called Paolo Pedercini. Forgive me, Paolo, if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And it's for JavaScript. And basically what it is it's technically a game engine in that it modifies JavaScript a little bit, but you basically make your game entirely in a block of code. There's no game engine where you drag and drop things into like a 3D visualization. There's no animator. Everything is done through code. And so if you want to make a sprite on screen, you say draw parentheses, the sprite name, comma, where it goes on the coordinates for where it goes on screen, and then you press play and then it's on screen, and then you put below that the input. And it's also really good for making tiny games. It's been a while since I've worked with P5.play, but it was actually the second programming language I think I used to make games beyond Pascal, which was in high school. And P5.play is a good way, I think, to get into. It's harder than Unity and it's harder than Game Maker, but I'd say it's almost arguably a better beginner's tool because it does a really good job of teaching you the connection between your code and what happens in the game, because things will not show up on screen or things will not happen unless you explicitly write them out in code. The engine doesn't hold your hand at all, and you get like just this blank black square that you just plop things into with code. And it's a good way to like organize in your head, these words relate to this thing that is happening on screen.
Yeah, so as we speak, my son is playing with Unity Playground. Last night we discussed this, Michelle and I, yesterday or the day before, I think. And last night I downloaded it, and I was like, well, Unity, a lot of people use it, so I'll see if it's usable for him. And they had something that I think is made for beginners, made for kids, or like it's the same thing, but I guess they have tutorials. Unity Playground. So I downloaded that and I got him started on it, and he just immediately started playing with it. Now, what he's doing with it, I think he's mainly just like figuring out how to change different things. They have these templates. So they have a platformer template, which he was messing with, and they have an FPS template, and they have, I think, some other types of game templates. So he really likes platformers. So he was there. He was playing with a platformer template.
Good man.
And it starts for him just doing things like, oh, can I change the color of this character, of this sprite? Can I like make this thing look like this guy, generic looking guy, look like Mario, things like that. So, and he also was doing that in PiGame, which is Python, but there's like a library for it called PiGame that lets you create stuff. And I mean, I like PiGame, but it's obviously not something that professional game developers would use. But it is totally all code. And what's cool about it is if you're using it on say a Raspberry Pi, you can actually make it do something physically to the Pi. So like we had a car game, and when he crashed in the car game, it like made some lights light up and say you crashed. So anyway, so we've gotten to that part of our show where we take questions from the audience, questions or comments from the audience. Does anybody in the audience have any questions or comments? We've had a rather quiet chat room today. I think the last thing anybody said was RGB.
I have a comment if we don't have any comments.
Yeah.
I thought of another cat game just off the top of my head. Cat Lateral Damage, if you've ever heard of it, is a game where you play as a cat and your goal is to just knock things off shelves and onto the floor, and your score goes up as you do that. And you can't beat the level until you knock a certain amount of things off the shelf. So just if we're talking about games where you play as a cat, I think that really, really embodies the whole thing.
Is that a PC game?
That is a PC game. Oh, that's another PC game where you play as a cat. It's actually in a charity bundle that Itch.io released recently, which is where all the indie devs upload their games. It's kind of like YouTube but for games, and it had like 1,000 games in it for $5.
That game sounds like a bad influence, though, for cats. I wouldn't like that.
Yeah, is your cat playing video games?
My cat is. I have an advanced cat. Like Abram has an advanced son. So
yes, yeah. Well, to be fair, they do have the tablet things where your cat can poke at it. I just love video games where you get to play as something just really out of the ordinary. I remember reading about a game a few months ago where you're a cloud or something and you get to go rain on people. And another one where you're a house washer and you go around power washing people's houses.
Oh yeah, there's one called
I don't know. I haven't tried it yet.
Where you go around flipping like the dirtiest, grossest houses in the world. And then there's another one, I forget the name of it, but you play as basically the cleanup crew in John Wick movies, where after John Wick goes around shooting everyone up, you are the cleaner who comes in afterwards and cleans up after the room and makes everything look nice.
Ah. Oh, the possibilities. Thank you, video games.
See, I mean, it definitely keeps it interesting. Well, I guess that's all for this week. But please join it. But thank you to everyone who's joined us live and to everyone who's watching later. Please hit like and subscribe if you could. For Tom's Hardware, I'm Abram.
I'm Sharon.
And I'm Michelle.
See you next time.
Bye.